All right, exciting news. This is the first time the 1612 Vari-mu compressor, at least the tube section, has been fired up and is running. I, for this demo, have not hooked up any of the control circuitry. So the RMS control is not in, neither is the meter or the meter control board. But what is in is the power supply. So it's 225 volts coming out of the pink supply at the back there. And then I've got plus and minus 18, and the 6 volts DC for the heaters is being fed there. That is currently live right now, so it's 225 volts into these tubes, so I have to be a little bit careful. And what I'm doing is I have passed the sine wave into the input of it, and I'm monitoring the output. That sine wave is at 1 volt peak to peak, 1 kilohertz. And I'm testing using a variable DC power supply here with this 10-turn pot. The control voltage currently on there's 23 volts on the control voltage pin. So this is the junction that feeds the reference point to the whole circuit. So here's my control voltage coming in here, and it's feeding into the center point. So that's basically the DC offset, for the lack of a better word, that's creating the Vari-mu effect. So what's interesting is I'm watching this output change as I twiddle that pot. Right now the yellow trace is the input, so it's on a 200 millivolts per division, and the blue trace is on 5 volts per division. The yellow trace obviously being the input, and the pink trace or purple trace being the output. So as I turn this pot here and control the DC voltage going into there, if I turn this down, say to 17.62, you see that output has come up. So in other words, the higher the voltage, DC voltage on that control pin, the lower the output of the signal. So as I turn it down, you can see it coming up and rising. What's really cool is once I get down to this range, 7 volts or so, and down lower, and I'll just crank it down, it starts to go up like we would expect, and then it plateaus. Not quite there yet. Let me just keep going. I'm now at 5 volts. There, starting to see some clipping. We're maxing out the tubes there. That's at 4 volts control voltage. Now I'm at 2.72 or almost 3 volts. It's starting to come down again. As I approach 1 volt, down to 0 volts. And there the signal has dropped to 11 volts to a 1 volt input. So there's that's an interesting thing. I will have to keep the control voltage to be sort of more linear above that knee, I think. But more to think about there. But that's a cool little first test of the circuit. The next thing I'll do is a frequency response just to see how the amplifier is behaving. I have a feeling just from listening to it, it's cutting off around 13 kilohertz, but I'm going to confirm that now.